Hi there, it's Miss Miller, and today we're going to talk about the post-mob, the three factors that lead to guilt. And we're also going to discuss the shift in relationships and tone from chapter 15 to chapter 16 of To Kill a Mockingbird. And we're going to look specifically at chapter 16. And so the first thing I want to talk to you about, and I think it's important to recognize, is the shift in relationships in To Kill a Mockingbird, chapter 16. Everything really changes. We start to see a lot of change. Chapter 15, we see the tone really change dramatically. But now in chapter 16, not only does the tone change, right, because it moves from a threatening tone to a more introspective tone, and then we look at the shift in relationships. There's a dynamics between Jem and Atticus. There's also a shift in relationship between Jem and Scout. There's also a change between Atticus and Aunt Alexandra. After the mob scene, nothing is really the same. We see that Jem is sort of growing up before our own eyes, and his compassion that he shares with his sister Scout is much different than we've seen in the past. Usually he isolates himself, but now even Scout recognizes that, wow, Jem is awfully nice about it. The fact that they've just come back from this mob, right? This is the next day, it's the morning, or actually this one's in the evening, and she recognizes he's awfully nice. He doesn't even say, hey, 9-year-olds don't do that. You know, he even lets her lay next to him because he wants to comfort his sister. He is really taking on this role as an evolving character. He's growing up. He's becoming a young man. And not only does Scout recognize this, but Atticus respects Jem, right? We know that Scout is the one that saved Atticus inadvertently in the initial or the last mob scene, but Jem was able to rescue him in the first one. But not only that, everyone is moved by the mob. The reality has struck them that this is really serious. The people are becoming increasingly angered by this idea that Atticus is going to be representing Tom Robinson, and they even echo those sentiments as we continue our progression of chapter 16. But everyone has lost their appetite, with the exception of Jem, right? The next morning, everyone can barely eat, right? But Jem's appetite was delicate, Jem's appetite was not delicate, right? He ate his way through 3 eggs, and Atticus watched him in frank admiration. So not only does Atticus recognize this, but Scout recognizes this. We do, however, also see a shift in relationship between Atticus and Aunt Alexandra, right? So we know that Atticus is relieved how everything played out, but Aunt Alexandra wasn't there. And so all she sees is from her lens, and she continues this narrative of, she sipped the coffee and radiated waves of disapproval. She is not happy with Atticus, with Scout, with Jem, and even Atticus responds to her when she says the children who slipped out at night were a disgrace to the family. And Atticus is now a little bit irritated with her, and he's responding, and the detail that's used to express his response of faint starchiness sort of exemplifies the idea that he's not going to back down from her anymore, because before he's a little complicit and he allows her to get away with a lot, but now that this mob scene has happened and it's sort of threatened the lives of their home, now he recognizes, like, you know what, I need to speak up. So he's getting a little irritated. This is all really stressful for Atticus. And so he does respond, and he says something along the lines of, Atticus said he was right glad his disgrace had come along. And disgrace obviously is referring to both Jem, Scout, and even Dill, right? That a gang of wild animals can be stopped simply because they're still human. So then we see Auntie has this warning frown, and she's directing that at Dill, because Dill rushes in and says, gosh, did you hear about it? It's all over Macomb County. We, deterred a mob of 100. And so she looks at him in disapproval or a frown. So Atticus is not really taking too kindly to Aunt Alexandra. He's going to bite back every single time. Jem and Scout's relationship is changing. Atticus and Jem's relationship is changing because Atticus respects him even more, especially after his recognition. Like, wow, he's not as troubled by everything as myself and Scout and even Dill. Now, as we go through the text, I think there's three things that we need to consider in terms of, will Tom Robinson get a fair trial? And this becomes explicit or implicit, as you might say, in chapter 16. One is Mr. Underwood plays a huge role, right? And he's named after a Confederate general, which we know just means that in Macomb County, they wanted to maintain slavery. So to be named after that, even though it's really clear that Mr. Underwood does not like blacks, right? Because even Aunt Alexandra reprimands Atticus for mentioning that in front of Calpurnia, and Atticus, he says, hey, look, that's how we are. We're transparent. We don't hide anything from anybody. But we see the alliteration of the local opinion held Mr. Underwood to be an intense, profane little man whose father, in a fey fit of humor, Christian Braxton Bragg, which happens to be Mr. Underwood, he had done his best to live down. He didn't want any part of it. He's trying to distance himself, but yet he is racist, right? He does not like blacks. But by the same token, ironically, he puts aside his sentiments to support Atticus. And he was the one in the back. He was ready to hold Atticus down, right? So we see the S in slow and the S in steady to describe Mr. Underwood. So that's one sign that things are going to not necessarily turn out the way we expect them to. Two is the Cunningham County. Well, it's Macomb County, of course, but the mention of the Cunninghams, so frequent in chapter 16 alone of To Kill a Mockingbird, leads one to believe that perhaps it should be called Macomb County. We see the Cunninghams described as a nest of drunk and disorderly individuals. They make up Macomb County. If Macomb County could speak, it would come from the mouths of the Cunninghams, right? They were litigants of the court. In one case, they had an estate hearing over the Cunninghams versus the Cunninghams. So the court is already familiar with the Cunninghams. They're welcome there, right? Not necessarily liked, but they're definitely welcomed. And then we know a classmate to Scout, Walter Cunningham. We were introduced to him early in the text, and now we're reintroduced to the Cunninghams, and we know, like, wow, not only was he poor, but now we see he's a part of the mob. So in particular, Mr. Cunningham is part of the Sarah mob, which we heard about in chapter 15. And so we also come to find that jury members, 1 to 2 of them are Cunninghams from chapter 16. That is really terrifying. So we've got the Confederate Underwood, who's a part of the community, who is named after a Confederate general. Then we have the Cunninghams all over Macomb County. They might as well name the county Macomb after them. And now we finally have Judge Taylor, who is a complete joke, right? If we think about the text, we have all these ideas, and it's like, okay, now if we thought Tom Robinson was going to get a fair trial, we know for sure now he's not, because we've got Judge Taylor. And also the Judge Taylor, not only Judge Taylor, but the fact that the courthouse or the jail was kind of alluded to as a gothic joke, right? And so now Judge Taylor is going to look over this hearing or this case. This man has informal court. He props his feet. He cleans his fingernails with a pocket knife. He dozes off. No one can read what he's writing. It's like chicken scratch. It's pilot fish writing. So, you can even see the image of him beyond the arrow, just sort of dozing off. We don't know. This is complete. Not only is the jail a joke, but this judge is a joke. So why we're even going through this is really not very clear, right? I think Atticus alludes to it like, hey, we already know the outcome of this trial, but at least we're going to hear the truth. But Scout does mention that regardless of his informality, that Judge Taylor still is a legitimate judge, and he takes what he does seriously. It's really hard to believe, though, and it's rather ironic. And it's terrifying, I would assume, for Tom Robinson to be in a courthouse where, you have someone named after the Confederate general. You've got the Cunninghams in there that have made it really clear that they are racist. And then not only that, but then you have Judge Taylor, who doesn't even treat the case seriously, and that becomes really obvious as we look at it. So that's the post-mob, 3 factors that lead to Tom Robinson's guilt. We already know how it's going to turn out. That's a close look at chapter 16.